Hello, everyone. My name is Sierra Jones, and we're going to talk about Chapter 2 from this research course. I'm going to give a summary of the chapter, highlight an interesting takeaway, and also discuss how this knowledge applies to my future goals. More so around culturally responsive math instruction and the professional development behind it. So, chapter two summary is really understanding research problems. So, it explores how research problems shape the foundation of a study and introduces two of the main research approaches, which are quantitative and qualitative research. So, in quantitative research, it's about numbers, statistics, anything that has a measurable variable. It also can help identify trends and patterns across large populations. So, if you were measuring students' performance on a standardized math test, this would be a great thing to use for quantitative research. When doing qualitative research, it's about exploring people's experiences through interviews, focus groups, and observations. So it helps researchers really understand the why behind a problem, maybe like investigating how students of color feel about their math learning experiences. Some of the research problems they must have four essential elements, which is the topic. So basically, what's being studied here, a problem statement. Why does this issue matter? Uh, there's some type of evidence, so identifying what gaps exist in current research, and then of course you want to have an audience who's really going to benefit from these findings. If you can identify these elements, ultimately the researcher can ensure that their study has a purpose and it has an impact. What was new or interesting to me? One thing that really stood out to me in this chapter was the importance of referencing literature. So, in academic writing, our opinion alone isn't really enough. So, you have to have backed up existing research, what can sometimes be hard because our experiences as educators, we know that this is basically how we feel, or we have observed, and sometimes we know that that's not always good enough, and that does um, it does play a part in the research, but just not necessarily all the time. So until we've ever published something of our own work, the credibility, it depends on how well we can support our claim with peer-reviewed sources. This made me realize how critical it is to stay informed about existing studies, especially when advocating for change in education. In my role as a training specialist, some of the things that I stay abreast on are not necessarily math related, but more so align what teachers are using in terms of technology pieces, maybe like what types of activities do they enjoy doing more so of, what are the areas in which teachers are struggling with in their classroom. So it really has to push me outside the comfort zone in reading chapter two to really just think differently, and really ultimately think back to my days of teaching, and just kind of some of my experiences and what are some of the researches that I can look at using. So if I really want to push for better culturally responsive teaching methods, then I have to be solid in the research to support any of my arguments. When I look at just like this chapter, it really connected me to want to reflect on the research that I can address in education in terms of its inequalities, especially in that math instruction. Many students from marginalized communities struggle with math. So, not because they lack the ability, but because sometimes the way math is taught, it doesn't always connect to their cultural experiences as well as just their day to day experience. It's just not relevant sometimes. And so we have to go outside of the rim of what's in the textbook to really provide for our students. And ensuring that students see themselves in that learning process is even more so important. And the research can help educators like myself in math understand those barriers that students face and what are some of the best practices for engaging them in that content. Uh, with professional development in education, I know just based on my experience as a teacher in PD, it can become very, very strategy driven, but not applicable type strategies, or a timeline of how to apply the steps. So, using real world problems and really like setting up PD where students are able, well, teachers are able to see exactly what it's like for their students to experience that. And the moment we can put them in the role as teachers, then we have better outcomes to know that they are more likely to apply it in their classroom once they can see this is what it should look like or how it could be implemented. How this applies to my future goals. Ultimately, I will apply this knowledge to any of my goals and my passion about equity and education, but really developing a strong research question. I want to study how culturally responsive teaching improves math engagement for underrepresented students. So, really identifying some type of research questions, looking at other literature review and understanding that. That also can play a part into how I create curriculum for my organization and just some of the professional development conversations and how we implement that in our strategies to really be able to help students grasp some of the ideas that we're trying to share with them around math, as well as around just making better decisions as individuals. So, chapter 2, of course, just reminded me that research isn't just about collecting data, those real world problems and just making a difference, as well as just connecting everything back to literature and back to the different types of research that could support what I'm doing is always important. So, thank you all for listening and have a great day.